The Adirondacks, upstate New York, a place with its own rugged kind of beauty and a proud sense of community. A place as lovely as 24-year-old Janine Ratcliffe.
She had dark brown eyes and dark curly brown hair, a lot of pizzazz, and a beautiful smile.
Olanzapine is very well tolerated. You shouldn't have any problems, okay?
But Janine is more than just a pretty face. As a pharmacist, she enjoys helping those in her community.
She was well known because everyone knew the family. They were reputable people, they were nice people.
Having the bubbly personality that my mother had, she was very interested in the people that came in.
Hi.
It's here she falls for one of her favorite customers.
Do you need reading glasses?
Jeff Glanda.
No, but I do need my asthma prescription filled because you take my breath away.
That's really bad.
Well, okay, I'd better up my game. How about dinner and a movie? I hear Porky's is really good.
Oh, strike two. You know what? Take me to see The Thing, and we have a deal.
I think I'm in love.
He would see this smile, and it drew him in, and he could get her laughing.
He was attractive, dark and handsome. He wore nice suits. He definitely would have fit her bill.
Okay, that was not for me.
It wasn't for me either.
The 31-year-old recently divorced court stenographer is quite the catch.
I'm gonna have nightmares for a week.
And Janine can't resist his charm.
It could get lonely out there in the middle of the night. If you ever need some company, I'm available.
I think what my mother saw in him was that he had this level of charisma, this level of confidence.
As far as their romance, they did things together. She did confide in me one time that he was very good in bed. I know she loved him.
2 years after they meet, the couple get married and settle down in Lake Placid, near the former Olympic Village.
It was ideal. That was a place for her.
When they moved to Lake Placid, it was kind of like they were riding a high.
All right.
After 8 years of marriage, Jeff and Janine have 2 young kids, Tyler and Jordan, who enjoy their parents' lavish lifestyle.
Yeah. Hey, need a drink? Come on, let's go.
I think the first time I saw their house, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It was like, to me, it was huge. I was just like in awe of what they had. He drove a Mercedes, she drove an SUV. They just had beautiful things, and I was always like, oh, that's so pretty, Little jealousy.
Okay, kid, fourth down.
But their taste for the finer things in life doesn't take away from their main priority, spending time with family.
We always pretended that, we were the New York Giants.
And he's down!
Those are the happy memories that we had.
Girls get to play as well. There you go. Fourth down, sweetie.
She was the ideal mom. She wanted to be involved in everything. She wanted to see us be successful. She always made sure to show her affection and her love for us.
She wanted a nice home. She got that. She loved to travel. She liked to go on vacation. She wanted children. She thought this was going to be her lifelong dream.
It's all part of the flamboyant Glenda lifestyle.
As a court reporter, he was probably making somewhere right around $80,000 to $100,000 a year. But Jeff had very, very flashy, expensive tastes.
My father loved to look good. When he would get dressed in the morning, he'd pick out his tie, he had his jewelry. He was very much about image.
He wanted it known that he was somebody special, that people should notice him.
There was always some kind of showboat mentality to it, but nevertheless, we had fun. We were spoiled kids, I guess you could say. We really had the life that any kid could hope for growing up.
Jeff, extroverted and ambitious, is determined to make himself well known.
Judge Hayes.
And well liked.
Jeff Glanda.
He was somebody who got along with everyone.
No, it's no trouble. I have my plow ready to go.
He was a very well-liked individual.
See you in 15 minutes.
But just how far will Jeff go to be a people pleaser?
It's Judge Hayes. You want me to say no?
Yeah. Say no.
Come on, Janine.
In Lake Placid, they get a lot of snow, and he would plow his friends' places
Don't be mad.
before he'd get his own family plowed out.
I'll just work out my frustrations with the shovel.
He would take care of other people before he'd take care of his own family.
Career comes first, and the family last.
He wasn't the dad that I think Janine had planned for him to be, that thought he would be.
Sorry, kid.
She thought he'd be more involved in the everyday aspects of their life.
Work took priority over virtually everything.
Psychotherapist Stacy Kaiser and forensic psychologist Brian Russell are concerned that social climbing takes priority over family.
On the surface, a marriage like Jeff and Janine's looks quite wonderful and that they have it all. But the fact that Jeff places such a huge importance on material things, on social climbing, on image, is actually really damaging for the relationship.
If you're chasing after more material stuff and it is cutting into time with each other, time to invest in your marriage, time to invest in your parenting, then I really start to question, are your priorities in the right place?
There is a good likelihood that Janine is feeling low on the priority list, that his priorities are other people instead of her. That could be bad for her self-esteem. It could make her be distant. It could make her create conflict in the relationship.
As the Glanda household becomes more toxic, Jeff turns to an easy solution.
My father would oftentimes have gin and tonic sitting in the car, drinking and driving. Working in the court system, he kind of felt like he was above the law, that he didn't have to follow the same rules that everybody else did.
And it's only a matter of time before those rules shatter to pieces.
There was telltale signs that there was something going on.
I don't want to be alone. I'm not meant to be alone.
9 years into their marriage, Jeff and Janine Glanda seem to have created a perfect family life in the beautiful town of Lake Placid, New York. But what no one sees is the corrosive life they live behind closed doors.
They were very affectionate when they weren't fighting. They definitely loved each other to a degree. It was a love-hate almost. From my father's end, a very controlling love. From her end, a very hopeless, helpless love.
Gotta go.
I think all she wanted was the perfect picket white fence family with us, and that just wasn't happening.
Bye, kids.
While it seems Jeff doesn't have much time for his immediate family, he does make time for his mother.
Jeffrey did everything for his mother. He bought her cars. He paid for almost everything.
After his father dies, Jeff wants his mother to move closer to them, so they build her a cottage on the property. The Glanda's handyman, Nick Pecoraro, helps build it.
He was a man that was dearly loved by our family.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, guys.
Come and play.
No, I'm too tired to play. Just kidding.
He was the throw you over his shoulder,
Room for one more.
happy-go-lucky, strong man who, if you needed something, you could call on him.
But the living arrangement with Jeff's mother doesn't last.
My grandmother stayed there for roughly a year. The entire time that she was living in the home, she complained that she just missed being at her house. So she eventually moved back to Tupper Lake and left that house vacant.
As the marriage enters its 10th year, Jeff's career is more demanding than ever.
I'm almost done, and then you can look at the transcript.
Dealing with a full plate of court transcripts, he hires some help.
Sherry was Jeff's secretary. She typed up his dictations, and she was always around.
She's around so much that Janine wonders if she was hired for more than just her expert typing skills.
If I were to open a dictionary and go to the section of M and look up mistress, I would see a portrait of Sherry. You see the tall blonde with the slim body. That's who you idolize as the mistress, and that's who she was.
I'm gonna need to stretch my legs.
Trust me, those legs don't need stretching.
And soon, Janine's suspicions turn into heartbreaking reality.
There were lipstick stains on the shirt, smell of perfume, hearing rumors of him driving around with somebody else. Telltale signs that there was something going on.
You're up late. It's my secretary's, Janine.
Just be straight with me, Jeff.
You have a vivid imagination.
Just tell me the truth so we can deal with it.
I'm going to bed.
Tell me the truth, or...
Or what? What are you gonna do, Janine? You gonna leave? Good night.
She would say to me, I don't think I could ever leave him. The only way I could ever leave him is if there was somebody else. I don't want to be alone. I'm not meant to be alone.
When it came to marriage, my mother valued that very highly. So she was dead set that if she was going to marry somebody, that it was going to be a permanent thing.
Sometimes relationships can overcome affairs if both partners are willing to work on things. The problem in this marriage is that Jeff isn't willing to work on things. We've already learned that Jeff is controlling, he's uncompromising, he wants things his way. So unless he wakes up one morning and decides he's not going to be with this other woman, then Janine is left with two choices: either put up with it or leave.
And then there's a third possibility, which is choosing to stay married and sort of have an amicable coexistence. It's not a romantic coexistence, not a sexual coexistence, but it is a resignation to the fact that we're going to stay under the same roof so that our kids have both of us here. We're going to have some semblance of family life.
Finally, Janine gives Jeff an ultimatum.
It's me or her, that's what it comes down to.
I'm not gonna fire her, Janine.
Then there's nothing left to talk about.
My father made no attempt to replace Sherry. He had no intention of trying to find somebody else to fill her position.
The couple agrees that Janine should move into the empty cottage, just 200 yards from the main house.
Janine wanted the children to be close to their father.
I was deeply depressed about it.
I didn't view it as a negative thing. I mean, no kid wants their parents to be apart, but when you see your parents fighting constantly and you know it's not something that's working, then it's almost better to see them in their separate elements.
As time goes by, the Glandas learn to deal with their new routine. But the separation doesn't seem to benefit anyone.
He lived large, and even though he had a substantial income, it wasn't that substantial.
Even so, they hire Nick to help out with upgrading both houses.
They put in a new bathroom, they put in new kitchen cabinets. They did a lot of fixing up.
Jeff even refurbishes the basement apartment and finds the perfect tenant.
Hey, kids. There's some raspberry lemonade in the fridge.
We slowly saw Sherry move in. She began to move her stuff downstairs, and at first it was like the live-in secretary, and then it became more apparent that there was more than just secretarial job duties that were on board for her stay.
It's really nice to find you again.
Yeah.
Janine seeks comfort in the arms of a married ex-boyfriend, Randy.
They would meet, have dinner, a few drinks, and occasionally meet and presumably have sexual relations.
I think it's gonna rain.
Looks like it. I don't mind it.
He gave her what she needed at the time. He made her feel beautiful again. He made her feel smart again.
Somehow, Jeff finds out. And to him, Janine's fling can't go unpunished.
My mother had a Barbie doll collection, the holiday Barbies. And someone had deliberately gone in and they had cut through the boxes. And at that time, I know my father had a spare garage door opener, so he was the only other person that could have done that. She was upset. It was more than just a malicious gesture at that point.
It just makes Janine more determined to go through with a divorce.
Carrie, I don't think I should wait anymore.
And perhaps a little paranoid.
Yeah, I found a lawyer.
I remember once her calling me and she was very upset because Jeff had just questioned her on something that she and I had just had a conversation about.
I just want to know where I stand.
I remember her saying, Carrie, are you telling people what I'm telling you? Are you repeating this? And I was like, no, I swear to God, I'm not telling anybody anything. It became a joke that, he must have your house bugged, Not ever really thinking it was true.
Yeah, no, you have my bank records. Done. Done and done. I sent you that 3 weeks ago.
Jeff had to be on top of everything. He had to know what Janine was doing and who she was talking to.
Fine.
While she wants to get divorced, Jeff is in no rush. In fact, a divorce settlement might ruin him.
He was in a very critical financial position. He was just teetering on bankruptcy.
My mother knew she had my father in the palm of her hand. When all is said and done, if they were to separate and the divorce was final, he would not come out on top.
Jeff does not just invade Janine's privacy. He invades her personal space.
Hey, Carrie. Have you seen Janine?
Randy and Janine were in Plattsburgh, and Jeff was looking for her.
She's not home. She hasn't been home for hours.
Family members realize that Jeff is desperate.
Well, if you see her, tell her I'm looking for her.
And they suspect he is drunk.
I said, oh my God, I think he's in her house. So then we called the police.
With Jeff losing control and his entire way of life on the brink, how far will he go to save it?
The state police officer pushed Janine out of the way and pulled his gun on him.
She turned as white as a ghost.
After Jeff Glanda refuses to end an affair with his secretary, his estranged wife, Janine, begins divorce proceedings and now finds an unwelcome guest in her new home.
When they turned the corner, Jeff is standing in the doorway in the dark in just his boxers, holding a glinting glass of gin.
I was looking for you.
The state police officer pushed Janine out of the way and pulled his gun on him.
Don't tell me I can't see my own wife in my own house.
I'm not your wife anymore. And I'll be gone soon enough. You can have your precious house.
Janine noticed that over by the phone was a steak knife.
I want to hold you. I just want to spend one night. Just the two of us.
Get the hell out!
I miss us. I miss us so much. Stop pointing that thing at me.
I have no proof to this or anything, but my feeling from that night was always I felt like he was going to rape her. Why is he in his boxers? Why is he drinking? Why is he in her house with the lights out?
It's not long before the family discovers why Jeff seems to know every detail about Janine's personal life, including her affair with Randy.
All set?
There was a time that my father was working at our kitchen and he had his tape recorder set up and he asked me to come over and started playing some of these sound bites. And what it was is recordings of my mother's phone calls.
He listens to every single phone call you make. He has hidden microphones in the house.
He knows exactly where you're going, who you're going to talk to, what your plans are. He knows everything.
Shaken, Janine goes to stay with her sister-in-law.
and she stayed there for, I think, 3 days. And we had long conversations. Don't go back. Don't do it. Stay here, for a while, find a place. And her response, as it always was he's the father of my kids. I don't want to take them far away from him.
I think that Jeff feels that he can play by one set of rules, and yet Janine has to play by a different set of rules. He's entitled to do things that he will not tolerate Janine doing. He can cheat, but Janine can't. He can trespass into Janine's house, but he'd be furious probably if she trespassed into his, and even the kids can see it.
Jeff's controlling behavior is beginning to escalate. And that's not what we would expect when a couple is separated. We would expect that he would detach himself and move on. He is bugging her phones, bugging the house, ruined her doll collection. All of these things are telling me that his anger at Janine is getting stronger and stronger. And it's also telling me that her living on the same property as him is a really bad idea.
A few days later, the kids are at their dad's house, waiting for Janine to give them a ride to school.
Around 7 o'clock, I call up to her house. There's no answer. Call again, still no answer.
My mother's a very punctual person. She was always on time, always there for everything.
A missing persons report is filed, and police start to look for Janine. 24 hours later, as the family begins to panic, an ominous discovery is made.
Now we have a fellow named Kevin Reynolds who's driving to work. He stops at the top of the hill to urinate. And when he does, he spots the wallet, checkbook, and purse.
Police are notified.
Investigator Hickey hears that these items have been found in a bizarre location. He sees tire tracks into the water, and he calls for the divers who go and immediately find the vehicle.
My father had come home from the state trooper barracks, and he sat down in a chair between Jordan and I, and Sherry was at the end of the table. And he started crying, and he said, "Mommy's been in an accident, and she's in heaven now." It was just such a surreal feeling of I didn't know what to do.
All I remember from that night is my brother sobbing. And that's when it really hit me that this is life. This is what's changed. Mom's gone.
The state police immediately know there's something terribly wrong. Janine is in the wrong position. She's not in the driver's seat strapped in. She's not properly dressed.
She was in her nightgown, which was an indicator that something isn't right here.
And the state of the car itself is a giveaway.
Car was in neutral. That doesn't make sense either. So all of that is suspicious, and then her ID is laid out on top. Why the heck would her personal property be laid out that way?
Although the autopsy points to drowning as a likely cause of death, it also suggests Janine may have been unconscious before reaching the lake.
During the autopsy, the medical examiner had noticed certain marks, red marks in and around Janine's neck. Those were stun gun marks.
With all signs pointing to murder, the family's grief turns to despair.
My father was legitimately upset about what had happened. He expressed that he was just completely lost, that he had really lost somebody that he had genuinely cared about.
Despite the acrimony between the pair and Jeff's threatening behavior, his sorrow seems genuine.
Jeff said he certainly knew nothing about any homicide.
I was with my girlfriend.
Hadn't seen his ex-wife, and that he was with his girlfriend, Sherry.
We were sitting around having a beer.
Jeff's alibi checks out. So investigators ask him to make a list of everyone who had visited the house in the past year. And there's one name that is conspicuous by its absence.
The real break in the case was Nick. The state police were watching Nick, and they were trying to put a little bit of pressure on him to let them know that they were looking at him. He was frightened, and that's when Nick bought a bus ticket and was trying to leave town, and the state police got that tip.
A tip that will lead to an astonishing confession.
Is he coming to talk to him, or is he coming to kill him?
Three weeks after Janine Glanda's suspicious death, state troopers intercept Nick Pecoraro on a bus, trying to flee town.
The investigators took him back to state police barracks.
During an 8-hour police interview, Nick tells an extraordinary story.
So it was in the springtime, and Jeff told me he wanted me to kill Janine. I didn't want to. I told him I'd think about it.
Nick claims that Jeff offers an incentive.
Jeff promised him a variety of things. He promised him a new pickup truck. He promised him firearms at one point. It always changed, and so now Nick is going along with it.
According to Nick, the two start making plans.
They're looking at culverts, they're looking at overpasses and bridges and trying to think of how they can get her and drive her off the road and then get away clean. And that plan doesn't make much sense. And then Jeff realizes, hey, wait a minute, freshwater drowning will get her to drive her car into the Cascades.
Cascade Lake is fresh water. That means it's identifiable.
He was the court reporter in a lawsuit involving a death by freshwater drowning. Freshwater drownings involve something called diatoms, which are these very small microscopic creatures that in freshwater drowning get into your bone marrow. Jeff was aware of that.
That Monday, he called and said tonight was the night.
Jeff knew that Janine had plans that night with her sister,
leaving the coast clear for their preparations.
You really need to do this?
Yeah. Haven't you heard of DNA?
I think so.
Well, now you have.
That man was hairy, and Jeff didn't want any physical evidence left at the scene. Jeff was very aware of the concept of forensic evidence from his work as a court reporter.
He told me to go through the yard and into Janine's house and hide.
Janine had gone home. She had gone into her bedroom, put on a nightgown.
Hello? Is anybody there? Nick?
And Nick attacked her in the living room.
I'm sorry. She was toppled over, light as a feather.
Stop! 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 Stop!
And then Jeff came in, and he had this box, black box. I think she was unconscious after that.
What happens next makes police think this case could have had a very different outcome.
Get on top of her.
I looked at him and he pulled his shirt, and I saw he had a gun tucked in his pants. And he told me again,
get on top of her. No!
Nick wasn't that type of guy.
I wouldn't do something like that.
The speculation was that if Nick had proceeded to try and have intercourse with Janine, that Jeff would have shot him and then said he came across Nick attacking her and shot him in the course of a burglary, robbery, rape.
So Jeff sticks to the original plan.
Go get the water. Hurry up.
His idea was to make it look like she had drowned in water from the lake. Very brutal. Then both of them attempted to dress Janine. They had pulled her jeans back onto her, but not gotten them above her hips.
The plan is for me to be in the car in the passenger seat with Janine when the car went into the water. More realistic that way, Jeff said. The transmission could be in drive, and then I could swim out. But when I drove out there and I got there, I just, the cliff was too steep.
It's a 60-foot drop down to the water.
He then put it into neutral.
I'm sorry.
And pushed the car down with Janine in the passenger seat.
I just watched the car sink into the lake. And then I got in my pickup truck and I got out of there.
Meanwhile, Jeff is cleaning up the floor because there's water everywhere. Then he took her purse with her checkbook and wallet and laid them out on the bluff area, the bank.
Nick doesn't seem smart enough to me to really make a complex plot to frame Jeff. Nick sounds to me like a scared guy at this point, and it really seems like law enforcement played that perfectly to their advantage. In this case, they actually make it known to Nick that he's being followed and that he's under suspicion, expecting that at some point he'll crack.
When I look at how Jeff did such a great job at manipulating Nick, it tells me what I was suspecting about him all along, which is that he is a narcissist and a sociopath. Nick really didn't have a chance in my mind. He didn't seem to be highly sophisticated. He was going to get something out of this in his mind that he really needed, which was some money and a new car, and Jeff was able to manipulate him completely and fully.
1 month after the murder, with Jeff firmly in their sights, police set a trap.
They took Nick and they brought him to a payphone.
Jeff, is that you? We need to meet. I'm scared. I can't wait much longer.
Jeff said he would come meet him. And then the question in the state police mind was, is he coming to talk to him or is he coming to kill him?
Get in the car.
Damn it, Nick! You ratted us out!
A high-speed pursuit ensued. A sergeant heard what was going on and blocked Jeff's ability to access his own home.
The police were concerned for Tyler and Jordan's safety. If he got back in that house, at the least, he would use them as hostages.
That sergeant was injured, and Jeff was taken into custody at the scene.
What I remember is getting a phone call in the middle of the night. Jeff has been in an accident and arrested, and I needed to come get the kids.
So a month and a day before we lost our mother, now it's looking like we're going to lose our father too.
With no blood or DNA evidence that links him to the crime, Jeff maintains his innocence.
He never confessed to the crime and denied his guilt throughout.
Could the police have the wrong man?
I'm writing to right a terrible wrong. I was with Janine that night.
The car had gone into the water accidentally.
Jeff Glanda is behind bars after Nick Pecoraro confesses to helping him kill his wife, Janine. Nick's story is convincing, until an anonymous letter is sent to a local TV news station.
I'm writing to right a terrible wrong. Jeff Glanda had nothing to do with the murder of his wife.
In that letter, Janine's boyfriend had been with Janine that night, and that the car had gone into the water accidentally after they had had a tryst in the parking area around Cascade Lake.
The car shifted into neutral on its own. I escaped, but I couldn't get Janine out of the car. We were having an affair. I stayed silent because I didn't want to destroy my family.
Could Nick's entire story be a lie? Has Jeff Glanda been framed?
Get in the car.
Jeff's own family clears up the mystery.
He had a sister who lived out of state, and he contacted her from the jail, and he gave her instructions to go to a local store and pay cash, and then burn the receipt, and buy a typewriter. She was supposed to mail the letter to the district attorney's office and to the local TV station. She felt guilty, and she then contacted law enforcement and confessed to what she had done. Jeff's one of the most violent and dangerous human beings I've ever prosecuted, and he's also intelligent and manipulative. He's a very, very dangerous man.
Nick's testimony reveals the full extent of Jeff's manipulation.
So? I slept on it, just like you said, boss.
And?
Look, I'm not the right guy.
You're the man for the job, Nick. It's safe, it's easy, it's quick. You know, at the courthouse, I get to meet a lot of judges, a lot of cops.
Yeah, I know.
Those judges, they can make my life really easy. But they can also make things really hard for you. I know about your priors, Nick.
Nick had a very, very minor brush or two with the law. And basically what he did was he recruited Nick by saying he was going to throw him in jail. Nick is so unsophisticated, poorly educated, and not terribly intelligent that this was terrifying.
Police discover that Jeff had motive as well as opportunity.
A few weeks before the homicide, Jeff obtained $50,000 worth of life insurance with double indemnity for a single car accident, which would have brought it up to $100,000. It's a lot of money. It would have helped him tremendously with his financial distress.
I believe Jeff killed Janine because of greed. He did not want any of his money going to her. He didn't want his retirement, nothing, to go to her.
It also explains why Janine's ID documents were lying by the side of the road.
He needs that life insurance money. He needs her dead, and he needs her found.
Jeff Glanda is convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. After pleading guilty to second-degree murder, Nick Pecoraro is sentenced to 20 years to life.
Nick's demeanor was really sweet and remorseful. He felt terrible about Janine's death. However, he did participate, and he participated willingly, which is why he was in fact guilty.
While I don't think that Nick is a highly sophisticated or intelligent person, He does appear to know the difference between right and wrong. And so to that end, I hold him completely responsible for his behavior. He knew what he was doing. He knew that it was wrong. He just wanted the benefits of what he was going to get for doing it.
Jeff seems to me like a guy who thought, as many sociopaths do, that he was smarter than everybody else, that he could pull off the perfect murder. The good thing about narcissists who commit crimes is they overestimate how smart they are when it comes to pulling off crimes.
The selfishness of my father's acts will forever impact the remainder of my life, but he is my only father. I can't change that. I can't change the way that I feel about him.
To this day, I will tell anyone I unconditionally love my father. They will say he's a monster. They will say he's an awful human being, but he is my father, and he is the only father I will ever have.
Janine's absence is still felt every day.
The people that mattered and the people that knew her, she was it. She had it all. She was a beautiful person.
The hardest part, though, is that her kids grew up without her. She's a grandmother now. I can't imagine. You know, I hate that all that was taken away from her.
Thank you for watching Investigation Discovery on Demand.
The white fluorescent glare of the forensic laboratory in 2025 offered a sterile, unforgiving contrast to the dim, suffocating shadows of the 2005 Hanoi alleyway where the mystery began, as technicians in hazmat suits meticulously brushed away 2 decades of compressed earth from the fragile remains that had finally broken their silence. The DNA results didn't just provide a name. They provided a thunderous indictment that shattered the carefully constructed piece of a neighborhood that had tried so hard to forget. Headline: The Face in the Mirror. As the genetic markers confirmed the identity of the girl under the floorboards as 22-year-old Lynn, the focus of the task force shifted with predatory precision from a missing person search to a cold-blooded murder investigation, centering on the only person who had the means, the motive, and the terrifying proximity to commit such a crime and then live atop the evidence. The lead investigator, a man who had seen the city's underbelly for 30 years, stared at the crime scene photos of the plastic-wrapped bundle and realized that the strange clue wasn't just the silver locket found in the dirt, but the very way the body had been positioned, a fetal tuck that suggested a desperate attempt to minimize the space required for concealment. The investigation soon turned toward the shadowy figure of Nguyen Van Hai, a distant relative who had been helping the family manage the property back in 2005, a man who had been the most vocal in his grief and the most active in the initial, fruitless search parties. Cold case, hot blood. The detectives began a grueling process of reconstructing a timeline that had been intentionally blurred by time and deception, tracing Hai's movements during those critical 48 hours in the summer of 2005 when the city was distracted by a massive heat wave and a local festival. They discovered that Hai, a former construction worker with specialized knowledge of the house's foundation, had conveniently offered to repair the storeroom floor just days after Lynn was reported missing, claiming that the dampness was attracting vermin. The community shock deepened as the realization took hold. The savior was the slayer. The interrogation room became a theater of high-stakes psychological warfare, where the ticking of the clock seemed to echo the sound of a shovel hitting the earth 20 years prior. Hai sat across from the investigators with a mask of practiced indifference, his eyes as flat and impenetrable as the concrete he had poured over Lynn's grave. But the strange clue that would eventually break him was something far more subtle than a confession. It was the discovery of a specific type of industrial-grade plastic sheeting, a rare variant used exclusively by the state-owned bridge construction company where Hai had worked in the early 2000s, a material that was never commercially available and matched the fragments found fused to the skeletal remains. Headline: The Plastic Shroud. As the detectives laid out the forensic evidence, the atmosphere in the room grew heavy with the weight of the past, the vivid descriptions of the burial site forcing Hai to relive the moments he thought he had successfully deleted from history. The investigators painted a picture of a hot July afternoon, a heated argument over a debt or a rejected advances, a sudden explosion of violence, and the cold, calculated decision to turn a home into a tomb. They spoke of the lingering shock that had paralyzed the victim's parents, who had trusted Hai to look after their daughter while they were away on business, a trust that was met with the ultimate betrayal. The narrative of the investigation moved with a fast-paced, relentless energy, stripping away Hai's alibis like layers of old paint. Witnesses who were now middle-aged recalled seeing Hai's motorbike parked outside the house at odd hours, and a retired neighbor finally came forward with a memory she had suppressed for 2 decades, the sound of heavy objects being dragged across the floor in the dead of night, followed by the rhythmic thud of a tamper. The deadlock was shattered by the sheer accumulation of circumstantial evidence that, when viewed through the lens of modern forensics, became an undeniable portrait of guilt. The mystery was no longer where is Lynn, but how did we let him get away with it for so long? The script of the crime was written in the very soil of the house, a story of a predator who used his knowledge of the local architecture to hide his sin in plain sight, counting on the fact that no one would ever think to look beneath their own feet. The tension in the interrogation room reached a breaking point when the lead detective presented the silver locket, now cleaned and gleaming under the harsh lights, and asked Hai why his own thumbprint was etched into the corroded metal, a final, miraculous trace of DNA preserved in a pocket of air within the plastic wrap. The shock on Hai's face was the only confession the city needed, a momentary crack in the armor that revealed the hollow, terrified man beneath the facade of the helpful relative. The community's reaction was a mix of righteous fury and profound sorrow, a collective realization that they had been harboring a monster in their midst, a man who had shared their tea and attended their funerals while the girl he murdered lay rotting just a few meters away. The haunting memories of Lynn's smile were now forever entwined with the gruesome details of her discovery, creating a permanent scar on the psyche of the district. The investigation didn't just solve a murder. It exposed the fragility of safety and the terrifying reality that the most mysterious disappearance can have the most mundane and domestic of causes. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place with a sickening clarity. The motive was a petty dispute over a small inheritance, a life snuffed out for the sake of a few million dong, and a moment of blind rage. The emotional climax of the case came when Lynn's elderly mother was finally able to provide her daughter with a proper burial, a ceremony that drew thousands of strangers who felt a strange, profound connection to the girl who had been a ghost for 20 years. The haunting impact of the unsolved case had finally found its resolution, but the price of that truth was the total destruction of the family's sense of peace. The house itself was eventually demolished, the owners unable to live with the knowledge of what had transpired within its walls, leaving a gap in the alleyway that looked like a missing tooth in the mouth of the city. Headline: The Earth Remembers. The cinematic-style storytelling of this tragedy serves as a grim reminder that in a city as dense and ancient as Hanoi, the layers of the past are always just a few inches beneath the surface, waiting for a crack in the foundation to leak out. The voiceover of history is often written in the silence of those who cannot speak, and the case of Hanoi 2005 is a testament to the fact that justice, though it may move at the speed of a tectonic plate, is inevitable. The vivid language of the forensic reports and the sensational headlines of the day have faded, but the community shock remains a visceral part of the neighborhood's identity, a story told in hushed tones whenever the humidity rises and the smell of damp earth fills the air. The script of the killer was a perfect one, until the very architecture he used as a weapon turned against him, the floorboards acting as a lid on a pressure cooker of guilt that finally exploded in the face of modern science. As the final legal proceedings concluded and Hai was led away to a life behind bars, the city seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief, though it was a heavy, labored breath. The lingering impact of the cold case is found in the way people now look at their own homes, questioning the history of the walls and the secrets buried in the crawl spaces. There is no such thing as a perfect crime when the victim refuses to be forgotten, and Lynn's presence in the house for 20 years was a silent vigil that eventually led to her own liberation. The mystery is over, the clues have been decoded, and the deadlock is broken, but the haunting echoes of that summer in 2005 will continue to resonate through the narrow streets of Hanoi for generations to come. The story ends not with a question, but with a chilling affirmation that the truth is a living thing, an entity that can survive for decades in the dark, waiting for the moment when the light of justice finally finds its way through the cracks in the floor. The case of the girl under the floorboards is a masterpiece of crime and consequences, a cinematic journey into the heart of human darkness that reminds us all that the most sensational headlines are often written in the quietest corners of our lives, and that the ground we walk on is never truly silent. The investigation closed the file, but it opened a wound in the city that may never fully heal, a permanent reminder of the 20 years when a killer walked among them and a victim waited patiently in the dirt for her story to be told to a world that had almost forgotten her name. The final image of the case is one of a single white lotus flower placed on the empty plot of land where the house once stood, a symbol of purity rising from the mud, a silent tribute to a life that was stolen, but a spirit that could never be truly buried. The heavy wooden doors of the Hanoi People's Court swung open with a groan that seemed to echo the 2 decades of silence that had preceded this day, as a sea of cameras and a wall of somber faces prepared to witness the final act of a tragedy that had begun in a humid alleyway 20 years ago. The air inside the courtroom was thick, a suffocating mixture of recycled air, the scent of old paper, and the palpable tension of a city demanding an answer for a life stolen and buried in the dark. Headline: The Reckoning. Nguyen Van Hai, the man who had lived for 20 years as a ghost in a living man's skin, was led into the dock, his hands shackled and his gaze fixed firmly on the floor, the very same type of floor that had served as the lid to his victim's coffin for 7,000 days. The prosecution began with a voice that was low and steady, a rhythmic dismantling of the lies that had held the case in a deadlock since 2005, as they presented a forensic tapestry so intricate and so damning that the defense's arguments felt like paper shields against a firestorm. They spoke of the skeletal witness, the girl who had waited with infinite patience in the cold earth to tell her story, and as they projected images of the silver locket and the industrial plastic onto the courtroom screens, a collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Headline: Evidence that Screams. The lead prosecutor detailed the strange clue of the thumbprint etched into the corroded silver, a microscopic signature of violence that had survived the dampness and the decay to point a finger across time directly at the man in the dock. The investigation process was laid bare, revealing how modern DNA profiling had turned a cold case into a scorching indictment, peeling back the layers of Hai's life to show the rot beneath. Witnesses who were once young and full of life now took the stand as gray-haired remnants of the past, their voices trembling as they recalled the mysterious disappearance and the helpful relative who had been so eager to lead the search parties. One elderly neighbor, her hands shaking as she gripped the railing, recounted a night in July 2005 when the sounds of a frantic, rhythmic thudding had emanated from the back of the house, a sound she had dismissed as renovations, a sound that she now realized was the sound of a grave being sealed. The community shock was renewed with every word, a secondary trauma for a neighborhood that had tried to bury its own suspicions along with the victim. The courtroom became a theater of the macabre when the forensic pathologist described the fetal tuck of the remains, explaining that the killer had folded the body with a cold, geometric precision to fit the narrow cavity beneath the storeroom floor, a detail that painted Hai not as a man of sudden passion, but as a predator of chilling calculation. The strange clue of the industrial plastic was further explored, with experts proving it was a rare material stolen from a state bridge project where Hai had worked, a shroud of stolen goods for a stolen life. The tension reached a breaking point when Lynn's father was called to the stand, a man whose entire existence had been a search for a daughter who was always right under his feet. He didn't look at the judge. He looked directly at Hai, his eyes two burning embers of grief and betrayal, and he spoke in a whisper that filled every corner of the room, asking how a man could eat at their table and then sleep above their daughter's bones. Headline: The Face of Betrayal. Hai remained a statue of stone, his psychological necrosis so complete that he didn't offer a single tear, even as the prosecution detailed the motive. A petty dispute over a small patch of land and a few pieces of gold jewelry, a motive so small it made the crime seem infinitely larger. The defense attempted to invoke the fog of time, arguing that 20 years had blurred the memories and tainted the physical evidence, but their words were hollowed out by the sheer physical presence of the forensic reports. The deadlock of the past 2 decades was shattered not by a single confession, but by the weight of 1,000 small truths that converged on a single point of guilt. As the trial moved toward its conclusion, the fast-paced nature of the legal proceedings seemed to mirror the frantic construction of a city outside, a city that was trying to outrun its ghosts, but was now forced to stop and look them in the eye. The sensational news of the trial dominated every headline in Hanoi, with the public gripped by the mysterious disappearance that had become a solved cold case of unprecedented horror. The closing arguments were a masterpiece of cinematic drama, with the prosecutor calling for a sentence that would reflect the 20 years of stolen life and the 20 years of calculated deception. When the judge finally rose to deliver the verdict, a silence fell over the court that was more profound than any that had come before, a silence that seemed to hold the breath of the entire city. Headline: The Final Verdict. The sentence of life imprisonment was read aloud, a recognition of the crime's severity and the passage of time that had spared Hai from the death penalty only by a technicality of the old law, but for the family, no sentence could ever be enough to fill the void beneath the floorboards. The emotional climax of the day was not the slamming of the gavel, but the sight of Lynn's mother collapsing in the arms of her remaining children, her 2-decade-long vigil finally over, her daughter finally free from the dirt. The impact of the case lingered long after the courtroom cleared, a haunting memory that had been etched into the stone of the city's history. The alleyway in Hai Ba Trung remained a place of strange clues and whispered rumors, but now the rumors were replaced by a hard, cold reality. The house was gone, but the ground remained, a permanent scar in the fabric of the neighborhood that reminded everyone of the lingering shock of 2005. The story of the girl under the floorboards became a benchmark for the Hanoi police, a reminder that no case is ever truly cold as long as the earth holds the evidence. The cinematic voiceover of this tragedy ends not in the courtroom, but in the quiet, reflective spaces of the community, in the way people now look at their own basements and backrooms with a new, fearful curiosity. The mystery is solved, the killer is behind bars, but the haunting impact remains, a shadow that falls across the bright lights of the modern city, a reminder that the past is never dead, it isn't even past. The community shock has settled into a somber awareness of the darkness that can dwell next door, and the vivid language of the headlines has become a part of the local lore, a story told to remind us all that justice has a way of rising from the depths. The silver locket, now a piece of evidence in a permanent archive, remains a symbol of a life that refused to be forgotten, a tiny glint of light in the darkness of a cold case that finally found its way home. The legacy of Hanoi 2005 is one of sorrow, but also of a strange, terrible beauty, the beauty of a truth that could not be suppressed by concrete, by time, or by the will of a murderer. As the city of Hanoi moves forward into 2026, the echoes of the sledgehammer and the gavel fade into the background noise of the metropolis. But for those who lived through the shock and the mystery, the world will never be the same. The ground is a little less solid, the floors a little more transparent, and the memories of a girl named Lynn are no longer confined to a shallow grave, but are free to wander the streets she once loved. The final headline is written in the hearts of the people. The silence is broken. The story is complete. The stream of narrative has reached its end, leaving only the haunting reflection of a city that learned, at a terrible cost, that the truth is the only thing that can never be buried forever. The case of the girl under the floorboards is closed, but its resonance will be felt as long as there are secrets hidden in the shadows, and as long as there are those who are willing to dig for the light. The echoes of the courtroom gavel have long since faded into the cacophony of Hanoi's relentless traffic, but the shadow of the 2005 cold case continues to stretch across the city's collective memory like a dark stain that no amount of time can bleach away. Headline: The Silent Aftermath. While the legal system has checked its boxes and the perpetrator sits behind bars, the psychological architecture of the Hai Ba Trung district has been permanently altered, leaving a community to grapple with the terrifying banality of the evil that lived among them for 2 decades. The community shock didn't end with the verdict. It transformed into a chronic, low-level anxiety that permeates every conversation about home security, every interaction with a distant relative, and every renovation project that dares to dig deeper than the surface. The fast-paced news cycles of 2025 have moved on to other tragedies, but for those who lived in the shadow of the house with the secret floorboards, the story is far from over. It is a mysterious disappearance that became a solved case, yet it remains a haunting question mark about the nature of human conscience. How does a man like Nguyen Van Hai look into the eyes of a grieving father for 20 years while knowing that his daughter's bones are just inches beneath their feet? Headline: The Anatomy of a Lie. This is the lingering shock that refuses to dissipate, a visceral realization that the most domestic spaces can become the most horrific crime scenes. The investigation process might have reached its cinematic climax, but the emotional debris continues to fall, hitting the family and the neighbors with a weight that is almost impossible to bear. This strange clue was the locket, but the true enigma was the killer's ability to function in a world he had fundamentally broken. Experts in criminal psychology now use the Hanoi 2005 case as a primary study in predatory compartmentalization, examining how a murderer can integrate himself so seamlessly into the family of his victim that he becomes an indispensable part of their mourning process. It is a chilling portrait of a parasite that feeds on the very grief it created. As the old house was finally reduced to rubble, the dust that rose into the Hanoi sky felt to many like the final exhaled breath of a secret that had been suffocating the neighborhood for 20 years. Headline: Dust to dust. But even with the physical structure gone, the coordinates of the crime remain etched into the city's geography. People still point to the empty lot with a shudder, telling the story of the girl who was there but wasn't there, the girl who was a ghost in her own kitchen. The vivid language of the newspapers has solidified into urban legend, a cautionary tale for a new generation of Hanoians who are warned that the history of their city is built on more than just ancient stone and modern steel. The cold case has become a cultural touchstone, a moment where the veil between the mundane and the monstrous was torn aside, revealing a truth that was both sensational and devastatingly simple. The impact on the victim's family is a narrative of lingering shock that no courtroom victory can truly resolve. The father, once a man of robust health, is now a shadow of himself, haunted not just by the loss of his daughter, but by the what-ifs that plague his sleepless nights. What if he had looked closer at the damp spot on the floor? What if he hadn't trusted the man who called him brother? These questions are the strange clues of a broken heart, pieces of a puzzle that can never be put back together. The cinematic tragedy of their lives is that the resolution of the case brought the end of hope, replacing the agonizing unknown with a reality that was even harder to swallow. The investigation's legacy has also triggered a seismic shift in how the Hanoi Police Department handles missing persons reports, with the 2005 failure serving as a grim blueprint for what happens when a case is allowed to go cold. Headline: Systemic Scars. There is now a renewed focus on the immediate circle, a realization that the strange clue is often hidden in plain sight, protected by the very intimacy of the crime. The deadlock of 2 decades was a failure of imagination as much as a failure of forensics, a refusal to believe that someone so close could be capable of something so depraved. Now, the community shock has been institutionalized into a more rigorous, skeptical approach to domestic disappearances. The sensational nature of the evidence under the floorboards has ensured that no stone is left unturned in modern investigations, with detectives frequently revisiting the foundations of houses associated with long-term missing persons. This is the solved part of the cold case, the lesson learned at the highest possible cost. The vivid language of the trial may have provided a sense of closure for the public, but for the professionals, it was a reminder of the fallibility of human intuition. The story of Lynn is now a permanent fixture in the Academy, a case study in the persistence of physical evidence and the frailty of the human spirit. Meanwhile, in the narrow alleys where the motorbikes still hum and the smell of street food still drifts on the evening breeze, the mysterious disappearance of 2005 has been replaced by a new kind of haunting. Headline: The Ghost in the Architecture. Residents report a strange heaviness in the air when they pass the site of the former house, a feeling that the ground hasn't quite settled even though the concrete has been cleared. This strange clue, found in the dirt, has become a metaphor for the secrets we all carry, the things we bury beneath the floorboards of our own lives to keep the world from seeing who we really are. The sensational headlines have faded into the background, but the community shock remains a living thing, a collective memory that binds the neighbors together in a silent pact of vigilance. They look at the new Hanoi with a different set of eyes, wondering which of the gleaming skyscrapers are built on foundations of forgotten tragedies. The fast-paced development of the city feels like a frantic attempt to cover up the past, but the case of the girl under the floorboards proves that the past is a stubborn inhabitant. It doesn't need an invitation to return. It only needs a crack in the foundation. The emotional climax of this entire saga is the realization that justice is not a healing balm, but a cold, hard light that exposes everything it touches. Headline: The Light of Truth. The solved status of the case hasn't brought Lynn back, nor has it erased the 20 years of her family's life that were consumed by a lie. The lingering shock is the permanent state of their existence now. The strange clue of the silver locket is now a museum piece of sorts, a relic of a life that was interrupted but never truly silenced. The cinematic voiceover of her story ends with the image of that locket, a tiny, tarnished heart that survived the dark and the damp to tell the world that love is stronger than concrete. The community shock will eventually soften into a somber respect for the dead, but the mysterious disappearance of 2005 will forever be the yardstick by which all other Hanoian mysteries are measured. It is the definitive cold case, the one that proved that the most strange clue of all is the human heart's capacity for both infinite cruelty and incredible resilience. As the sun sets over the Red River, casting long, orange shadows over the city, the story of the girl under the floorboards feels like a part of the city's breath. Headline: Hanoi's Endless Echo. The vivid language of the script, the sensational details of the crime, and the fast-paced hunt for the killer are all just chapters in a much larger book about the soul of a city that never forgets. The deadlock is broken, the mystery is solved, but the haunting remains. It is a haunting of the mind, a reminder that we are all walking on the stories of those who came before us, and that sometimes those stories are buried just deep enough to be felt but not seen. The community shock has become a part of the city's DNA, a cautious, watchful energy that defines the character of the old quarters. The strange clue of the 2005 case is a beacon for those who still seek the truth, a sign that no matter how long the night, the morning will eventually break through the floorboards. The final cinematic shot is not of the killer in his cell, but of the city itself, vibrant, chaotic, and beautiful, carrying within it the heavy, silent weight of its secrets and the enduring hope that one day, all the missing pieces will be found. The narrative of Hanoi 2005 is a closed circle, but the ripples it created will continue to move across the water of the city's history for a long, long time. The lingering shock is the final note in this symphony of shadows, a low, resonant frequency that vibrates in the bones of every Hanoian who remembers the girl who went home and never left. The story is over. The voiceover fades into the hum of the city, and the cold case is finally, officially at rest, leaving us to wonder what else is waiting beneath the surface of the world we think we know. Headline: The Final Silence. The mysterious disappearance is a ghost no more, but a truth that has been earned through 20 years of tears and the strange clue of a silver locket that wouldn't stay buried. The impact is permanent, the shock is deep, and the memory of Lynn is finally, beautifully, free.
Gemini đã nói.
The rain in Hanoi has a specific weight, a heavy, vertical descent that seems to scrub the grime from the French colonial shutters and the tangled power lines, but it can never wash away the memory of what was found beneath the floorboards of that small, unassuming house in the Hai Ba Trung district. As we stand in the year 2026, the empty lot where the house once stood serves as a jagged gap in the city's architectural smile, a permanent reminder of a mysterious disappearance that held a neighborhood hostage for 2 decades before the earth itself decided to scream. Headline: The Void That Speaks. The community shock that once paralyzed these narrow alleys has shifted into a somber, reflective legend, a story passed down to the newer residents who move into the rising glass towers nearby, oblivious to the fact that the very ground they tread upon is a graveyard of secrets. The cold case of 2005 is no longer a file gathering dust in a precinct basement. It has become a living, breathing part of the city's lore, a cinematic tragedy that proves the past is never truly buried, only waiting for the right moment to break through the surface. The strange clue of the silver locket and the industrial plastic has been immortalized in the annals of Vietnamese forensics, taught to every young cadet as a lesson in the persistence of physical evidence and the fallibility of human deception. We look at the empty space today and see more than just a plot of land. We see the intersection of a family's shattered hope and a killer's calculated coldness, a place where the lingering shock of betrayal still vibrates in the humid air. The investigation process has reached its legal end. The gavel has fallen, and the cell door has locked. But the narrative of Lin remains a pulsing current in the heart of Hanoi, a voice that refuses to be silenced by the passage of time or the pouring of new concrete. The fast-paced evolution of the city continues around this site, with motorbikes screaming past and the neon lights of high-end cafes reflecting in the puddles, yet there is a perceptible shift in energy when one crosses the invisible threshold of the crime scene. Headline: The Geography of Grief. The mysterious disappearance was once a source of terror, a cold case that suggested a predator wandering the streets, but the resolution brought a different, more intimate horror. The knowledge that the predator was already inside, sitting at the family altar, pouring tea for the parents of the girl he had murdered. This realization has fundamentally changed the social fabric of the district, creating a community shock that is less about fear of the unknown and more about a profound skepticism of the familiar. People now look at their own floorboards, their own strange clues of behavior in those they trust, wondering if they too are walking on a foundation of lies. The vivid language used by the prosecutors in the final trial still hangs in the minds of the survivors, a description of a fetal tuck and a plastic shroud that turned a domestic setting into a house of horrors. The deadlock of 20 years was not just a failure of the police. It was a success of a sociopath's ability to mimic empathy, a performance that only ended when a sledgehammer met the rotting wood of a back storeroom. The lingering shock for the family is a physical weight, exhaustion that comes from 20 years of mourning a ghost only to find a skeleton, a transition from the hope of a return to the finality of a grave. As we move deeper into the aftermath, the cinematic-style tragedy of the case reveals its most haunting layer, the transformation of the strange clue into a symbol of ultimate truth. Headline: The Locket's Legacy. The silver locket, once a simple gift, is now a holy relic of justice, a piece of evidence that bridged the gap between the technology of 2005 and the sophisticated forensics of 2026. It serves as a reminder that while a killer can hide a body, they cannot hide the soul's connection to the world, a connection that manifests in the most minute details left behind in the dirt. The community shock has matured into a form of collective vigil, with neighbors often placing small white flowers at the edge of the empty lot, an unofficial shrine to the girl who is a ghost for 20 years. The mysterious disappearance has been solved, but the cold case of the human heart remains open, a mystery that no DNA test can ever fully explain. Why did he do it? The question remains a strange clue in itself. A motive buried so deep in the psyche of Nguyen Van Hai that even his life sentence feels like an incomplete answer. The vivid language of the crime scene reports has been replaced by the quiet prayers of a mother who can finally visit a headstone instead of a missing person poster, a transition from a nightmare to a somber reality. The lingering shock of the neighborhood is now a part of its identity, a story that defines the resilience of a people who saw the worst of humanity and responded with a demand for the truth. In the final assessment of the Hanoi 2005 case, we must look at the deadlock as a metaphor for the secrets we all carry. Headline: The Architecture of Secrets. Every house has its shadows. Every floorboard has its creaks, but few hold the weight of a stolen life. The community shock of this discovery was a warning to the city, a signal that the mysterious disappearance of our moral compass is the greatest threat of all. The strange clue was not just the physical evidence, but the silence of the killer, a silence that lasted 2 decades and nearly succeeded in erasing a human being from history. The cold case was a battle between the darkness of the grave and the light of the truth, and the light, though delayed, was inevitable. As the cinematic narration of this tragedy comes to a close, we are left with the image of Hanoi at night, a city of 1,000 lights, each one potentially hiding a strange clue or a lingering shock. The story of Lynn is a reminder that justice is not just a legal outcome, but a spiritual necessity, a way for the earth to heal its wounds and for the living to finally breathe. The community shock will fade into history. The empty lot will eventually be built upon, and the mysterious disappearance will become a footnote in the city's archives. But the strange clue of the silver locket will always shine in the darkness, a beacon of hope for all the cold cases that still wait for their day in the sun. Headline: The Final Echo. The impact of the discovery beneath the floorboards has created a new standard for the investigation process in Vietnam, a protocol that values the vivid language of the crime scene as much as the testimony of the witnesses. The deadlock was broken by a combination of luck and modern science, but it was sustained for 20 years by a killer's chilling arrogance. The lingering shock of his betrayal is the true cold case, a mystery of the human condition that we will continue to explore in every cinematic reconstruction of this crime. The community shock is the price we pay for living in a world where the floorboards can hold such secrets, but the resolution of the case is the reward for our persistence. The mysterious disappearance of Lynn is over, but the story of the strange clue will live on, a testament to the fact that no matter how deep the hole, no matter how thick the concrete, the truth will always find a way to the surface. The vivid language of this narration is a tribute to a life that was nearly forgotten, a life that was found in the dirt and elevated to a symbol of justice for an entire nation. The lingering shock is the final note of this voiceover, a resonance that stays with the listener long after the screen goes black, a reminder that the most sensational stories are the ones that are true, and the most strange clues are the ones we find in our own hearts. The case of Hanoi 2005 is a closed chapter in the police books, but it remains an open wound in the soul of the city, a cold case that will never truly be cold as long as we remember the girl under the floorboards and the strange clue that brought her home. Headline: Rest in the Light. The final cinematic shot pulls back from the alleyway, rising above the rooftops of Hai Ba Trung, until the entire city of Hanoi is visible, a pulsing, vibrant entity that has finally let go of one of its darkest secrets. The community shock is a ripple on the surface of a deep ocean, a sign that something has changed, that a mysterious disappearance has been answered, and that a strange clue has fulfilled its destiny. The cold case is solved, the narrative is complete, and the silence of the floorboards has been broken forever. The city of Hanoi in the year 2026 is a masterpiece of motion and light, a metropolis that has reinvented itself 1,000 times over, yet it remains a place where the shadows are just as thick as the humidity rising from the West Lake. Beneath the vibrant, neon-soaked surface of the modern capital, there are stories that refuse to be paved over, secrets that have been compressed by the weight of millions of footsteps until they have become as hard and unforgiving as the concrete itself. The case of the 2005 disappearance is no longer a whispered rumor or a faded photograph on a dusty archive shelf. It has become the ultimate cautionary tale of the hidden darkness that can dwell within a single room, behind a locked door, and under a family's very feet. Headline: The Earth Gives Up ITS Dead. For 20 years, the silence of that narrow alley in Hai Ba Trung was a deceptive piece, a mask worn by a killer who walked among his victims with the practiced ease of a saint. The community shock that erupted when the floorboards were finally lifted was not just a reaction to the discovery of a body, but a profound realization that the monster they feared was the man who had helped them search for the light. This is the final, chilling chapter in the cold case that turned the city upside down, a story of a mysterious disappearance that found its resolution in the most visceral and sensational way imaginable. The strange clue of the silver locket and the industrial shroud was just the beginning of a forensic excavation that has rewritten the rules of justice in the capital. As the legal proceedings have reached their ultimate conclusion, we are left with a landscape of lingering shock and a neighborhood that will never again trust the ground it stands on. The investigation process was a grueling marathon of scientific precision and psychological warfare, a journey through 2 decades of deception that required the detectives to think like the architect of the crime himself. They had to understand how a man could pour concrete over a human soul and then live his life with a clear conscience, eating meals and sleeping soundly just inches away from the evidence of his depravity. This is the sensational truth that the public has struggled to digest, the sheer, terrifying proximity of the killer to his victim. Headline: The House That Kept the Secret. The vivid language of the forensic reports described a crime scene that was frozen in time, a bubble of 2005 preserved beneath the foundation of a modernizing city. The strange clue of the thumbprint on the locket was a miracle of preservation, a message from Lynn sent across the decades to ensure her murderer would finally face the light. The deadlock was broken not just by science, but by the sheer, unyielding demand of the truth to be told. The community shock has now settled into a permanent part of the local identity, a story told in the tea shops and the narrow NGO where the neighbors still glance at the empty lot with a mixture of pity and dread. They remember the girl who went missing, and they remember the man who pretended to care, and the dissonance between those two memories is a lingering shock that no verdict can ever truly soothe. The mysterious disappearance is now a horrific certainty, a permanent fixture in the annals of Hanoi's most notorious crimes. As the sun sets over the Red River, casting a long, crimson shadow over the Hai Ba Trung district, the cold case of 2005 feels like a ghost that has finally been laid to rest, but the echoes of its discovery still ring through the city. Headline: The Legacy of the FLO Yardies. This was never just about a single murder. It was about the vulnerability of our domestic sanctuaries and the strange clues we ignore in the people we think we know. The vivid language of the trial painted a picture of a betrayal so deep it felt like a structural failure of the human spirit. The community shock was a ripple that became a wave, changing the way the city looks at its own history and its own neighbors. The mysterious disappearance that once defined Lynn's legacy has been replaced by a narrative of resilience and forensic triumph, a sensational victory for a justice system that refused to give up on a ghost. The strange clue found in the dirt has become a beacon for every other cold case in the archives, a sign that the ground will not keep its secrets forever. The lingering shock is the price we pay for the truth, a heavy weight that we must carry so that the victims can finally be light. The investigation is closed, the files are sealed, and the killer is a number in a state prison, but the mysterious disappearance of 2005 will forever be the story that changed the way Hanoi sleeps at night. The sensational nature of the evidence under the floorboards has ensured that this case will be studied for generations, a cold case that became a masterclass in forensic anthropology and the psychology of the long con. Headline: The Architecture of a Killer's Mind. We look at this strange clue of the locket and see a girl's life interrupted. We look at the industrial plastic and see a man's cold calculation. The community shock is the sound of 1,000 illusions shattering at once, the realization that the mysterious disappearance was actually a domestic burial. The vivid language of the headlines is faded into the background noise of the city, but the lingering shock remains in the eyes of the family who spent 20 years looking at the horizon when they should have been looking at the floor. The cold case is a testament to the fact that time is not an eraser, but a preserver, a force that keeps the strange clues safe until the world is ready to see them. This mysterious disappearance was a lie told by a man who thought he was smarter than the earth, but the earth has a memory that outlasts any human deception. Headline: The Truth Breaks Through. The community shock has transformed into a somber respect for the investigative process, a recognition that the cold case, Unit is the city's last line of defense against the darkness. The strange clue was the key that unlocked a 20-year-old door, revealing a nightmare that the city had tried so hard to forget. Now, in the quiet moments before the city fully wakes, the lingering shock of the Hanoi 2005 case feels like a heavy fog that hasn't quite lifted. Headline: The silence after the scream. The mysterious disappearance is no longer a mystery, but a tragedy with a beginning, a middle, and a devastating end. The strange clue found under the floorboards is a reminder that justice is a patient hunter, a force that can wait for 2 decades for a single thumbprint to reveal itself. The community shock has taught us that the most sensational crimes are often the ones that happen in the most ordinary places, behind the most familiar faces. The cold case of Lynn is a closed chapter, but its lessons are written in the very stone of the city, a vivid language that warns us all to be careful about what we bury and who we trust. The mysterious disappearance was a ghost that haunted the alley for 20 years, but the strange clue turned that ghost into a witness who finally got to tell her story in a courtroom filled with the people who loved her. Headline: Justice for the Forgotten. The lingering shock is the final, resonant note of this cinematic tragedy, a vibration that reminds us that the truth is the only thing that can truly set us free. The cold case is solved, the mysterious disappearance is resolved, and the community shock has settled into a quiet, enduring grief. The strange clue under the floorboards has been removed, but the memory of what it revealed will always be a part of the city's heart. Headline: Hanoi's Darkest Mirror. We look into the mirror of this case and see the worst of ourselves in the killer and the best of ourselves in the detectives who never stopped looking. The vivid language of the trial has become the script for a city that is learning to heal, a city that knows that every cold case is a debt that must be paid. The mysterious disappearance of 2005 is the benchmark for every mystery that follows, a sensational reminder that the truth is always there, waiting just beneath the surface, waiting for the floorboards to be lifted. The lingering shock is our connection to the past, a thread that binds us to the girl who was lost and the truth that was found. The cold case is over, but the story of the strange clue will never end, a permanent part of the cinematic voiceover of Hanoi's history. Headline: The Ground Remembers. The final cinematic shot of this saga is one of the city at dawn, a place of endless movement and hidden depths where the mysterious disappearance has finally been replaced by the sensational light of the truth. The strange clue is home, the cold case is closed, and the community shock is the peace that comes with knowing that even the deepest secrets eventually find their way to the light. The vivid language of the city's streets will continue to tell the story, a story of a mysterious disappearance that became a solved case through the power of a single, strange clue found under the floorboards of a house that could no longer keep its secret. The impact of this case on the legal landscape of Vietnam is profound, a sensational shift toward forensic-led investigations that prioritize physical evidence over hearsay. Headline: The Forensic Revolution. The cold case of 2005 has become the gold standard for how to dismantle a 20-year-old lie, using vivid language and scientific proof to break the most stubborn of deadlocks. The community shock was the catalyst for this change, a demand for a higher level of accountability that has resonated through every precinct in the country. This mysterious disappearance that once seemed unsolvable is now a textbook example of how the strange clue can lead to the ultimate resolution. The lingering shock is the energy that drives the new generation of investigators, a reminder of the cold cases that still wait in the shadows for their own strange clue to be found. The sensational truth of the Hanoi 2005 case is that justice is a living entity, a force that breathes under the floorboards and waits for the moment to strike. The vivid language of this narrative is a testament to the power of that truth, a cinematic tribute to the girl who refused to be buried and the strange clue that brought her killer to his knees. The community shock is the final witness to this tragedy, a collective memory that will ensure the mysterious disappearance of 2005 is never forgotten and that the cold case remains a symbol of hope for the hopeless. The story is done. the strange clue is recorded, and the lingering shock is the final silence of a mystery that has finally found its voice. The narrow alley in Hai Ba Trung has finally reclaimed its quiet, but it is a silence that feels heavy with the weight of 20 years of deception, a silence that seems to vibrate with the frequency of the strange clue that finally brought a killer to justice. The cold case of 2005 has moved from the front pages of the sensational tabloids into the permanent records of Hanoi's most chilling criminal histories, leaving behind a community shock that has permanently altered the way the people of the old quarters look at their neighbors and their own floorboards. Headline: The echoes of the exhumation. Even though the house has been demolished and the soil turned over, the psychic footprint of the girl under the floorboards remains a haunting presence in the district, a reminder that the most mysterious disappearance can have a resolution that is far more terrifying than the unknown. The investigation process might be officially closed. The gavel might have fallen with the finality of a tombstone, but the lingering shock continues to ripple through the city like a stone dropped into the dark waters of the Hoan Kiem Lake. We look at the solved status of the case and realize that justice is often a cold comfort, a flickering light that reveals the wreckage of a family and a community that can never be fully repaired. The vivid language of the trial may have provided the facts, but it could never capture the sheer, soul-crushing weight of the 20 years that Lynn spent in the dark, just inches away from the laughter and tears of those who loved her. Headline: Beyond the verdict. The cinematic tragedy of this case is not just in the act of murder, but in the sensational longevity of the lie, a lie that was sustained by the very man who should have been a protector. This is the ultimate strange clue of the human condition, the ability to mask a monster behind a familiar face, to hide a grave in the heart of a home. The community shock of 2025 has matured into a somber, collective awareness of the darkness that can dwell in the most mundane of places. The alleyway, once a bustling hub of neighborhood gossip and shared meals, now carries a strange clue in its very atmosphere, a sense of mysterious disappearance that hasn't quite been resolved by the conviction of Nguyen Van Hai. People walk a little faster when they pass the empty lot, their eyes averted from the spot where the floorboards once hid a nightmare. The vivid language of the headlines has been replaced by the quiet, uneasy reflections of a neighborhood that realizes it lived alongside a killer for 2 decades without ever suspecting the truth. Headline: The anatomy of betrayal. This was the cold case that broke the heart of Hanoi, a story of a girl who disappeared into the thin air of her own home and was only found when the walls themselves began to crumble. The investigation's success was a triumph of modern forensics, but it was also a devastating indictment of the blind trust that once defined the city's close-knit communities. The strange clue of the silver locket is now a part of the city's mythos, a symbol of the truth's refusal to stay buried, no matter how much concrete is poured over it. The lingering shock is not just for the family, but for every Hanoian who realizes that their own mysterious disappearance could be waiting just beneath their feet. Headline: The end of the 20-year lie. As we look at the legacy of the 2005 case in 2026, the sensational nature of the discovery has given way to a more profound, existential dread. The cold case was a mysterious disappearance that was solved by the very architecture that facilitated the crime, a poetic and vivid reminder that our environments are the silent witnesses to our most private acts. The community shock remains a palpable force, a strange clue to the fragile nature of the social contract in a rapidly modernizing city. The investigation process, while thorough, could never fully account for the psychological endurance of a killer who could look into a mother's eyes and lie for 7,000 consecutive days. This is the sensational horror that continues to fascinate and repulse the public, the sheer, unadulterated coldness of the act. The lingering shock is the realization that the truth was always there, whispering from the dirt, waiting for someone to listen to the strange clue of the damp floorboards. Headline: The locket's last word. The cold case is officially solved, but the questions it raised about trust, family, and the dark corners of the human soul remain as open and raw as the day the remains were unearthed. The mysterious disappearance of 2005 has become a benchmark for all future investigations in Vietnam, a cold case that changed the very vivid language of the law. Headline: Hanoi's Awakening. The community shock served as a catalyst for a more rigorous, scientific approach to domestic crimes, ensuring that no strange clue is ever ignored again. The lingering shock has led to a cultural shift where the sensational headlines of the past are now viewed with a more critical, forensic eye. We look at the mysterious disappearance of Lynn not as a ghost story, but as a failure of the collective gaze, a cold case that was allowed to exist because we chose to believe the lie over the strange clue of our own intuition. The vivid language of the forensic reports now serves as a blueprint for the future, a sensational reminder that the truth is a physical thing, a piece of silver, a fragment of plastic, a thumbprint in the dust. The community shock is the price of our awakening, a lingering shock that will ensure that the next mysterious disappearance is met with the full force of a city's renewed vigilance. Headline: The Silence Beneath the City. As the years continue to pass, the story of the girl under the floorboards will be told and retold, a sensational narrative of mysterious disappearance and cold case resolution that will never lose its power to disturb. The community shock will be inherited by the children who play in the streets of Hai Ba Trung, a strange clue to the history of their neighborhood that they will carry into the future. The lingering shock of the 2005 case is a permanent scar on the psyche of Hanoi, a vivid reminder that the truth is never truly cold, but always simmering just beneath the surface of our lives. Headline: Buried Alive in Memory. The investigation is over. The killer is forgotten in a cell, but the mysterious disappearance that became a solved case remains a sensational testament to the endurance of the human spirit and the inevitability of justice. The strange clue found in the dirt has become a light in the darkness, a vivid sign that even the most mysterious disappearance can find its way home. The community shock is the sound of the city breathing again, a lingering shock that has finally found its resolution in the sensational light of the truth. Headline: The Price of Truth. The cinematic arc of this tragedy has reached its final, haunting frame, but the vivid language of the case continues to echo through the corridors of the city's power and the humble dwellings of its people. The cold case of 2005 was a mysterious disappearance that held a mirror up to the soul of Hanoi, revealing a community shock that was both a symptom of the crime and a tool for its eventual solution. The strange clue was the locket, but the true evidence was the lingering shock that refused to let the memory of Lynn fade into the smoggy air of the city. We look at the solved case today and see a sensational victory for the truth, a vivid reminder that the mysterious disappearance of one person can change the course of 1,000 lives. The community shock is the final witness to this story, a strange clue that leads us back to the realization that the truth is the only foundation that can truly support the weight of our lives. The cold case is done, the vivid language of the headlines is quiet, but the lingering shock remains, a sensational heartbeat in the heart of Hanoi. Headline: The Final Chapter. The mysterious disappearance that began in a heat wave in 2005 has ended in the cool, clear light of 2026, a cold case that was solved by the sheer, unyielding power of the strange clue. The community shock has settled into a vivid memory, a sensational reminder that the truth is never cold, but always waiting to be found. The lingering shock of the case is the legacy of a girl who refused to be forgotten, a mysterious disappearance that became a solved case because the strange clue of her life was too powerful to be suppressed. The vivid language of this narration is a final tribute to that truth, a sensational voiceover for a tragedy that has finally found its peace. Headline: The Truth is the Only Home. The community shock is over. The mysterious disappearance is resolved, and the cold case of 2005 is finally, beautifully, at rest. This strange clue has led us to the end of the alley, to the end of the lie, and into the light of a new day for Hanoi. The vivid language of the city will continue to hum, but the lingering shock of the girl under the floorboards will always be a part of its song, a sensational reminder that the truth is the only thing that can never be buried. Headline: Silence and No More. The year 2026 has brought a new kind of light to the streets of Hanoi, a clarity that filters through the morning fog and illuminates the cracks in the pavement where the past used to hide. Yet for those who remember the sweltering heat of July 2005, the air will always carry a faint, metallic tang of secrets unearthed. Headline: The Final Breath of the Cold Case. The narrow alley in Hai Ba Trung is no longer the stage for a mysterious disappearance that haunted a generation. It is now a site of quiet pilgrimage, a place where the concrete holds no more lies and the community shock has finally settled into a somber, collective peace. We stand at the end of a 20-year journey, a cinematic descent into the darkness of human betrayal that found its resolution in the most sensational way imaginable, not through a sudden confession, but through the patient, silent testimony of the strange clue found beneath the floorboards. The investigation process has reached its absolute zenith. The legal machines have ground to a halt, and the man who thought he could bury his sins under a layer of industrial plastic is now a forgotten number in the state's penal system. But the story of Lynn is not just about a cold case solved. It is about the enduring power of the truth to navigate the labyrinth of time and the strange clue that refused to let a soul be erased from the city's conscience. The vivid language of the trial may be over, but the lingering shock is the heartbeat of the neighborhood, a rhythmic reminder that the ground we walk on is never truly silent. As the morning sun hits the empty lot where the House of Horrors once stood, the city seems to hold its breath, acknowledging the 20-year deadlock that was broken by a single hammer blow against aging wood. Headline: The Architecture of Justice. The mysterious disappearance of 2005 was a wound that refused to heal, a cold case that turned a family home into a mausoleum of whispered fears, but the strange clue of the silver locket changed everything. We look at the community shock today and see it as a transformative force, a catalyst that has forced the city to confront its own shadows and the vivid reality of domestic violence. The investigation's legacy is written in the new forensic protocols and the heightened vigilance of a public that now understands the strange clue can be hidden in plain sight, protected by the very intimacy of the home. The sensational news cycles have moved on, but the lingering shock remains a visceral part of the district's identity, a story told to remind us that the most dangerous place is often the one where we feel the most secure. The mysterious disappearance was a masterclass in deception, but the cold case resolution was a masterclass in persistence, a vivid demonstration that even the most strange clue can lead to the ultimate reckoning. The cinematic voiceover of this tragedy now enters its final, reflective movement, shifting from the fast-paced hunt for the killer to the slow, heavy realization of the cost of the truth. Headline: The Price of the Buried Past. For 2 decades, a family lived with a ghost, walking across the very spot where their daughter lay in a fetal tuck, her life condensed into a small cavity in the earth. The community shock of this proximity is the true, strange clue of the case, a psychological trauma that has left a permanent scar on the psyche of Hanoi. We ask ourselves how a mysterious disappearance could last so long in such a crowded city, and the answer lies in the deadlock of our own assumptions. We assumed the killer was a stranger. We assumed the strange clue was somewhere far away. We assumed the floorboards were just wood. But the cold case proved that the truth is often much closer than we dare to imagine, a vivid and sensational reality that was waiting for the right moment to break through. The lingering shock is the lesson we carry into the future, a strange clue to the fragility of our social bonds and the resilience of the human spirit. In the quiet corners of the city, the mysterious disappearance of 2005 is now a closed file, but the community shock has become a part of the local folklore, a story of a strange clue that changed the way we look at our own history. Headline: Hanoi's Endless Vigil. The cold case was a sensational reminder that the earth has a memory, a vivid ledger of every act of violence and every strange clue left behind. We look at the solved status of the investigation and see the lingering shock of a family that can finally mourn with the certainty of the truth. The mysterious disappearance is no longer a source of agonizing deadlock, but a vivid chapter in a larger narrative of justice. The strange clue found under the floorboards is the ultimate symbol of this resolution, a tiny piece of silver that carried the weight of a 20-year-old crime into the light of the present. The community shock has softened into a somber respect for the investigative process, a sensational acknowledgement that the cold case was never truly cold as long as the truth was waiting to be found. As the cinematic narration of the Hanoi 2005 case concludes, we are left with a single, haunting image of the strange clue, resting in an evidence locker, a silent witness to a mysterious disappearance that finally found its voice. Headline: The final word. The community shock of the exhumation has faded, but the lingering shock of the betrayal remains, a vivid reminder of the darkness that can exist in the heart of a home. The cold case is a sensational victory for the city's conscience, a strange clue that justice is a patient hunter that never stops tracking its prey. We look at the empty lot in Hai Ba Trung and see not a void, but a vivid space of remembrance, a place where a mysterious disappearance was finally transformed into a solved case. The community shock is the final echo of a hammer on wood, a strange clue that the truth will always find a way to break through the floorboards. The cold case is over. The vivid language of the headlines is quiet, and the lingering shock is the peace that comes with knowing the truth. Headline: Buried and No More. The story of Lynn and the strange clue under the floorboards is a sensational journey through the mysterious disappearance of a soul and the cold case of a city's heart. The community shock was the fire that forged a new commitment to justice, and the lingering shock is the smoke that remains, a vivid reminder of the fire. We stand at the end of the alley, at the end of a 20-year deadlock, and look at the strange clue of the silver locket one last time. It is a vivid and sensational end to a tragedy that should never have happened, a mysterious disappearance that was finally, beautifully, and terrifyingly solved. The cold case is done, the community shock is at rest, and the strange clue is home. Headline: The silence is the truth. The cinematic voiceover fades, leaving only the sound of the city breathing, a city that has finally reclaimed one of its lost children from the darkness beneath its feet. The mysterious disappearance of 2005 is a ghost no more, but a vivid and sensational victory for the light, a strange clue that even in the deepest cold case, the truth is never truly buried. Looking back from the vantage point of 2026, the community shock has become a vivid part of the oral history of Hanoi, a strange clue to the city's evolving sense of safety and trust. Headline: The long road to closure. The mysterious disappearance that once felt like an insurmountable deadlock is now a solved case that stands as a monument to forensic tenacity. The vivid language of the investigation has translated into a safer city, a sensational outcome for a tragedy that began in such a dark place. The strange clue found in the dirt is the lingering shock that keeps us vigilant, a vivid reminder that the past is always with us, waiting for its story to be told. The cold case of 2005 is a sensational reminder that the truth is the only thing that can truly close a mysterious disappearance and heal the community shock of a neighborhood. This strange clue has led us to the final frame of this cinematic journey, a vivid and sensational resolution that reminds us all that justice is the ultimate foundation of our lives. The final cinematic movement is one of absolute stillness, a contrast to the fast-paced chaos of the city outside. Headline: The stillness after the storm. The mysterious disappearance of Lynn is a solved case. The cold case files are archived, and the community shock has dissolved into a quiet, enduring memory. The strange clue under the floorboards has been the catalyst for a sensational change in the way we view our own homes. The vivid language of the past 20 years has reached its final punctuation mark. The lingering shock is the final, resonant frequency of a mysterious disappearance that refused to stay buried. The strange clue was the locket, the cold case was the lie, and the sensational truth was the victory. Headline: Home at last. The cinematic voiceover of the Hanoi 2005 case ends here, in the quiet light of 2026, where the strange clue has finally brought the mysterious disappearance to its ultimate, haunting, and beautiful end. The community shock is over, the vivid language is still, and the cold case is finally at rest.
Gemini đã nói.
The heavy, saturated air of Hanoi in the early months of 2026 seems to vibrate with a frequency that is both ancient and terrifyingly new, as if the city itself is finally exhaling the last of the secrets it tried so desperately to hide beneath the weight of 20 years of industrial development and urban sprawl. Headline: The final echo of the void. The cold case of 2005 has moved beyond the courtroom and the headlines, embedding itself into the very marrow of the city's identity, a permanent scar that reminds every resident that the ground beneath their feet is never as solid as the maps suggest. We are standing at the threshold of a new era of urban consciousness, where the community shock that once defined the Hai Ba Trung district has mutated into a form of collective hypervigilance, a strange clue to the hidden anxieties of a modern metropolis that is still haunted by the ghosts of its unpunished past. The investigation process into the disappearance of Lynn has reached its official conclusion, but the psychological investigation into the soul of the city has only just begun, a vivid and sensational exploration of the darkness that can exist in the most domestic of spaces. We look at the empty lot today and realize that while the body has been recovered and the killer has been sentenced, the mysterious disappearance of our sense of safety is a wound that may never fully close. This strange clue was the silver locket, but the true evidence was the 20 years of silence that allowed a monster to walk among us, a cold case of the human conscience that continues to ripple through the narrow alleys and the high-rise apartments of the new Hanoi. Headline: The architecture of paranoia. In the wake of the 2005 case, the construction industry in the capital has undergone a silent revolution, not just in terms of safety and materials, but in the very way workers approach the earth. Every renovation project in the old quarters is now a potential excavation of a cold case. Every sledgehammer blow against a rotting floorboard is accompanied by a silent prayer that the dirt beneath will remain empty. This is the lingering shock of the discovery, the realization that our homes are not just shelters, but potential tombs, their foundations capable of swallowing a life and keeping it secret for decades. The vivid language of the forensic reports has become a part of the local building codes, a sensational reminder that the integrity of a structure is only as good as the truth it stands upon. Contractors in 2026 speak of Lynn's Law, an unwritten code of conduct that demands every strange cavity, every pocket of industrial plastic, and every strange clue be reported immediately to the authorities. The community shock has been baked into the very concrete of the city, a mysterious disappearance of the old, naive trust that once defined the relationship between neighbors and the land they shared. Headline: The Phantom in the Penal System. While the city moves forward at a frantic, fast-paced rhythm, the man responsible for the cold case of 2005, Nguyen Van Hai, exists in a different kind of time, a stagnant, airless reality within the walls of a maximum security prison where the lingering shock of his crimes is his only companion. Reports from the facility describe a man who has become a strange clue, himself a silent, unmoving figure who stares at the floor of his cell with an intensity that suggests he is still looking for a way to bury the past. There is no remorse in his eyes, only a hollowed-out, mysterious disappearance of the soul, a psychological deadlock that mirrors the 20 years he spent living above his victim. The vivid language of his psychiatric evaluations paints a portrait of a man who didn't just commit a murder, but who attempted to rewrite reality itself, a sensational act of hubris that only shattered when the physical world, the wood, the dirt, the locket, decided to testify against him. His presence in the prison system is a lingering shock to the guards and the other inmates, A reminder that the most dangerous criminals are not the ones who rage, but the ones who can wait, the ones who can turn a cold case into a 2-decade-long performance of innocence. Headline: The Survivor's Vigil. For the family of Lynn, the year 2026 is not a time of closure, but a time of quiet, exhausted reckoning with the strange clue of their own survival. The mysterious disappearance that once consumed their every waking hour has been replaced by a vivid and sensational reality of what was lost. Not just a daughter, but 20 years of birthdays, weddings, and simple morning coffees that were stolen by a man they called brother. The lingering shock for them is the realization that their grief was a weapon used against them, a cold case of emotional manipulation that is just as horrific as the physical crime. They visit the cemetery where Lynn now rests, a place where the strange clue of her silver locket is etched into the marble of her headstone, a vivid reminder that the truth is the only thing that could finally bring her home. The community shock they feel is tempered by a profound, weary gratitude for the forensic teams and the investigators who refuse to let the deadlock of time win the war. They are the living, strange clues of the 2005 tragedy, their faces a sensational testament to the endurance of love in the face of the ultimate betrayal. Headline: The voiceover of a modern metropolis. As the cinematic narrative of The Girl Under the Floorboards reaches its final, sprawling movement, we must acknowledge that Hanoi itself has become the primary narrator of this cold case. The vivid language of the city is found in the way the neon lights reflect off the damp pavement, in the fast-paced energy of the young people who don't remember 2005, but who carry the lingering shock of the story in their cultural DNA. The mysterious disappearance is no longer a gap in the records, but a foundational myth of the new Hanoi, a sensational story that reminds us all that the cost of progress is the constant vigilance against our own shadows. This strange clue was the silver locket, but the final evidence is the way we choose to live now, with our eyes open, our questions ready, and our community shock transformed into a commitment to the light. The cold case of 2005 is a vivid reminder that the silence of the past is never empty. It is a pressurized vessel of truths waiting for the right moment to explode. Headline: The Ethics of the Sensational. We look at the vivid language and the sensational headlines that have defined this case for 20 years and realize that they were the only things that kept the mysterious disappearance from becoming a total erasure. The community shock was a necessary fire that burned through the apathy of the bureaucracy, forcing the cold case back into the light when everyone else wanted to move on. This strange clue was a gift from the universe to a family that had suffered enough, a vivid and sensational miracle that turned a construction site into a courtroom. As we conclude this cinematic journey, we are left with the lingering shock of the finality of the truth, a resonance that will stay with the city of Hanoi as it continues to grow and change. The mysterious disappearance of 2005 is a solved case, but the lessons of the strange clue are eternal, that the truth is the only foundation that will not crumble, the only floorboard that will not rot, and the only cold case that can ever truly be put to rest. Headline: The Final Frame. The cinematic camera pulls back from the narrow alley of Hai Ba Trung, rising above the tiled roofs and the tangled wires, until the entire city of Hanoi is a shimmering grid of light against the darkness of the Delta. The mysterious disappearance is a single point of shadow in this vast landscape, a cold case that has finally found its resolution in the vivid and sensational light of 2026. The community shock is a fading echo, the strange clue is a preserved relic, and the lingering shock is the wisdom we take with us into the future. We hear the fast-paced pulse of the city, the vivid language of the streets, and the quiet, steady breath of a family that is finally at peace. The mysterious disappearance of Lynn is over, the strange clue has done its work, and the cold case is officially, irrevocably closed. The floorboards have been replaced, the concrete has been poured, but the truth remains, a silent, gleaming presence that will always remind us that in the heart of Hanoi, nothing is ever truly lost, and no one is ever truly forgotten. The vivid language of the silence is the final word, a sensational and powerful end to a tragedy that turned the world upside down, only to set it right again in the light of the truth. Headline: Light over Hanoi. The community shock is the peace of the dawn, the strange clue is the hope of the day, and the cold case is the memory of the night. The story is complete. The narrative stream has reached the sea, and the voiceover fades into the eternal hum of the city that refused to forget. Headline: The legacy of the locket. In the final seconds of this cinematic journey, we return to the strange clue that started the final reckoning, the silver locket, now cleaned of the 2005 dirt, resting in a glass case in the city's forensic museum. It is a vivid and sensational symbol of the mysterious disappearance that became a solved case, a strange clue that proves that love, like the truth, is an indestructible force. The community shock of its discovery will always be a part of the city's history, a vivid reminder that the cold case files are never just paper. They are people, they are families, and they are the very soul of the city. The lingering shock is the final gift of the case, a sensational and powerful lesson that ensures the next mysterious disappearance will not take 20 years to solve. The vivid language of the streets will continue to echo with the name of Lynn, a strange clue to the city's resilience and its refusal to let the darkness win. The cold case is done. The community shock is at rest, and the mysterious disappearance has finally, beautifully, and terrifyingly found its way into the light. The heavy, humid air of Hanoi in 2026 feels as though it is finally decompressing, a slow exhalation from the lungs of a city that has held its breath for over 2 decades, as the final legal and social reverberations of the 2005 cold case settle into the permanent foundation of Vietnamese criminal history. Headline: The Radiance of Justice. We have traveled through the labyrinth of a mysterious disappearance that paralyzed a community, witnessed the sensational breakthrough of a sledgehammer against rotting wood, and felt the community shock that transformed a trusted relative into a predatory monster. But the ultimate legacy of the girl under the floorboards is not one of darkness, but of a blinding, unyielding light. The investigation process that reignited in 2025 has become a gold standard for forensic excellence, a vivid and powerful demonstration that time is not an ally to the murderer, but a slow-moving trap that eventually snaps shut on the strange clue left behind in the dirt. The lingering shock that once felt like a terminal illness for the Hai Ba Trung district has evolved into a profound, collective wisdom, a realization that the safety of a neighborhood is not built on walls of brick and mortar, but on the transparency of the human heart and the courage to look beneath the surface. The cold case of Lynn is no longer a source of agonizing deadlock or whispered rumors. It is a sensational testament to the fact that in a modernizing Hanoi, no soul is too small to be fought for, and no secret is deep enough to stay buried forever. Headline: The Museum of Truth. In a quiet wing of the city's forensic headquarters, the strange clue of the silver locket now sits in a climate-controlled glass case, its tarnished surface a vivid contrast to the high-tech surroundings, serving as a silent narrator for the thousands of young cadets who pass by it every year. It is the sensational heart of a curriculum that emphasizes that the most mysterious disappearance can be decoded if one has the patience to sift through the dust of 20 years. The community shock of the 2005 case has been distilled into a professional rigor, a fast-paced commitment to ensuring that no other family has to walk over a grave for 7,000 days. We look at that locket and see more than just evidence. We see the lingering shock of a life interrupted and the vivid language of a justice system that finally learned how to listen to the silence. The cold case files of Hanoi are being reopened with a new sense of hope, driven by the sensational success of the floorboard discovery, as detectives realize that the strange clue they need might be resting just inches away from where they are standing. The mysterious disappearance of Lynn has become the catalyst for a national awakening, a vivid and powerful movement toward a society where the truth is the only foundation that is allowed to stand. Headline: The Final Reckoning of Nguyen Van Hai. Deep within the iron ribcage of the state prison, The man who thought he could outrun the earth has reached the end of his own psychological deadlock. Reports from the medical wing describe a man whose physical decline has mirrored the collapse of his 20-year lie, a vivid illustration of the lingering shock that guilt inflicts upon the human frame when it has nowhere left to hide. He is a strange clue to the limits of human depravity, a sensational example of how a mysterious disappearance can consume the predator just as surely as it consumed the prey. There are no more headlines for him, no more fast-paced interrogations, only the vivid and haunting silence of a cell that feels remarkably like the crawl space he once dug. The community shock that his name still evokes is tempered by the knowledge that he is a relic of a darker time, a cold case of a man who chose the dirt over the light. His story is the vivid warning that accompanies the legend of the floorboards, a sensational reminder that the strange clue of a murderer's conscience is the one thing that can never be fully suppressed. Headline: The Family's New Dawn. On the anniversary of the discovery, the family of Lynn does not gather at the empty lot in Hai Ba Trung, but at a vibrant new park dedicated to the memory of the city's missing, a place where the vivid language of the trees and the sensational bloom of the lotuses offer a different kind of narrative. The lingering shock of their betrayal has been replaced by a powerful sense of purpose, as they lead a foundation that supports forensic research and victims' rights, turning their mysterious disappearance into a beacon for others lost in the dark. They are no longer the victims of a cold case deadlock. They are the architects of a vivid and sensational legacy that ensures their daughter's name is synonymous with the triumph of the truth. The strange clue of the locket remains a part of their daily conversation, a vivid reminder that Lynn never truly left them, that she was fighting to come home every single day she spent beneath the floorboards. The community shock they once shared with the neighborhood has blossomed into a sensational solidarity, a vivid and powerful bond that proves that even the most mysterious disappearance can lead to a deeper connection between the living. Headline: The Voice of the City. As this cinematic voiceover reaches its final, sprawling conclusion, the camera pans across the horizon of Hanoi, a city that is no longer just a collection of alleys and strange clues, but a vivid and sensational tapestry of stories that have been redeemed by the light. The cold case of 2005 is the anchor of this narrative, a powerful reminder that the mysterious disappearance of our shared humanity is the only tragedy we cannot survive. The vivid language of the streets, the fast-paced energy of the markets, and the lingering shock of the past all blend into a single, sensational symphony of a city that has found its voice. The strange clue was the beginning, the community shock was the middle, and the vivid truth is the end. We hear the powerful resonance of the gavel one last time, not as a sound of punishment, but as a sound of liberation for a girl who waited 20 years to breathe the air of her city again. The mysterious disappearance is over, the cold case is closed, and the strange clue has fulfilled its destiny. Headline: The Floorboards of the Future. We look at the new Hanoi and see a city that is building on a foundation of honesty, a vivid and sensational urban landscape where the lingering shock of the past is used to reinforce the structures of the future. The mysterious disappearance of Lynn is the cornerstone of this new awareness, a strange clue that reminds every citizen that they are the keepers of each other's safety. The vivid language of this final chapter is a powerful tribute to the resilience of the human spirit and the sensational inevitability of justice. The community shock has faded into a vivid and haunting memory, a strange clue that will always point us toward the light. The cold case of 2005 is a sensational victory for the truth, a vivid and powerful end to a mysterious disappearance that will never be forgotten. The narrative stream has finally reached the ocean of history, leaving us with the lingering shock of a story that changed everything. Headline: The Eternal Vigil. The final frame of our cinematic journey is not of the evidence, the prison, or the empty lot, but of the sun rising over the Long Bien Bridge, its vivid light reflecting off the water where the secrets of the past used to flow. The mysterious disappearance of 2005 is a solved case, a sensational triumph of the strange clue, and a vivid reminder that the truth is the only thing that can truly set us free. The community shock is the silence of the dawn, the lingering shock is the warmth of the sun, and the vivid language is the song of the city. The cold case is done. The strange clue is home, and the mysterious disappearance has found its peace in the light of 2026. The voiceover fades, the screen goes white, and the only thing that remains is the vivid and powerful knowledge that beneath the floorboards of our lives, the truth is always waiting to be found. Headline: The light prevails. The narrative of Hanoi 2005 cold case solved. Bang Chung Doi Nin Na Lam Dao Lon Ton Bo Vu On reaches its ultimate, seamless conclusion here, a sensational and vivid journey through the heart of darkness and back into the light. The strange clue was the locket, the cold case was the silence, and the lingering shock is the wisdom. The mysterious disappearance of Lin is no longer a mystery, but a vivid and powerful truth that will echo through the alleys of Hanoi forever. The community shock has become a sensational strength, a vivid and powerful foundation for a city that refuses to let the past stay buried. The strange clue has spoken, the cold case is closed, and the vivid language of justice is the final word.